Have you ever poured everything you had into writing and shooting a film only to get to post-production and realize you have way more fixes in post than you thought? I'm Jake, your indie VFX guy, and in this video, I'm sharing a special guest lecture I gave to the incredible students at Kids in the Spotlight, a nonprofit film program where young creators are producing a short film filled with visual effects. Our goal? To give them the tools they need to plan ahead, so their VFX shots are well executed and don't turn into unexpected, time-consuming fixes down the line. If you're interested in checking out their program and supporting them, you can check out their website, kitsinc.org, or click on the link in the description below. Now, a lot of what you'll hear in this lecture comes straight from my book, Shooting for VFX, your on-set guide to saving money in post-production. So if you're interested in finding out how you can get your copy, stick around to the end of the video and I'll tell you how. If that sounds helpful, go ahead and render me out a like and hit that subscribe button for more tips, tutorials, and interviews to start saving yourself time and money on your VFX in post. Now let's dive in.
I'm Jake Kuna. I'm a writer, director, as well as visual effects producer, supervisor, and artist. I co-host a podcast called the Hollywood Unveiled Podcast, actually with Logan here, where we pull back the curtain on the Hollywood entertainment industry and get to know the people and stories behind the magic. And that's where we got to meet your very own KITS board member, Miss Shelley Wallace, and she told me about this program, and I'm so excited to be here, especially. I run a YouTube channel where I help independent filmmakers save both time and money on their visual effects through better production planning and in pre-production. I've worked on nearly 100 titles, ranging from feature films, TV series, commercials, streaming shows. Recently, I authored a book titled Shooting for VFX, Your On-Set Guide to Saving Money in Post-Production. A lot of that is what we're going to be talking about today. Now, in all my years in visual effects, working with independent films, I've seen everything. So many issues come up in post-production that are completely 100% avoidable. Issues that lead to overworked artists, exploding budgets, in some cases films left completely unfinished just before crossing the finish line because they couldn't afford or figure out how to fix the product. Working on a film, whether it's a feature or a short, takes everything you got. You guys know that. Blood, sweat, tears, especially time and money, and you cannot waste those. The last thing I want for you to do is put all your work into this, plan, shoot, edit your film, and then only find out when you get to post that maybe the footage you shot wasn't ideal for what your VFX needs were, leading to way more time, money, and resources being spent to fix the problem. Or worse, maybe the shot doesn't make it into the movie because it couldn't get done and it gets cut entirely. You don't want that. I've seen it happen. So with that in mind, I'm here to talk about these pitfalls. I'm here to help you execute on your vision to put it up on the screen while avoiding the biggest, most costly mistakes that I see most. And the first way of doing that is by taking one particular phrase out of your vocabulary. It is absolutely the most toxic phrase you could say on a film set. Fix it in post. Okay, it's not the most toxic. I'm sure there's a few others we could think of, but you get the idea. So why does this phrase come up? It comes up when something isn't working out on set. It comes up when the crew is in a rush. It comes up when someone just wants to skip a few steps. But here's the thing. A movie, TV show, a film production, it's one big group project. And you guys know about group projects, I assume, right here. So, in fact, it's one of the greatest group projects, in my opinion, really. But here's the thing about it. There's always that one person.
Yeah.
That one person who doesn't pull the weight. Nobody here, obviously, nobody here, but this person drags down the group. They don't meet their responsibilities. They either decided not to work on or life circumstances got in the way and they couldn't work on their part of it. But whatever the reason, they leave more work for everybody else, right? So as far as they're concerned, hey, someone else handled it. It got done, right? But if you've ever been the one stuck holding the bag, you know how much harder it is to do it now, right? So this is what happens when someone says, fix it in post. They might be saving a few minutes on set. They might save a few hours on set. They might even save money on set. But they're just deferring the work and the cost to later. And sometimes it's even more. It'll cost even more to do later. And I've been told that you've been surveyed and you guys are really interested in VFX. And we will talk about VFX. We are talking VFX, but I'm not here to teach VFX, though. This is not a how-to talk, exactly. This is actually more important. This would be a how not to talk. I'm going to teach you how not to create more work for yourself in post-production, how not to shoot yourself in the foot by capturing footage that's problematic for your VFX needs. I'll teach you how not to cost yourself more money in post, leaving you without resources to finish your movie. You see, I've seen so many filmmakers in post suddenly realize they don't have the resources to cover all the fixes in post. But if you're Marvel, that's a different story. You know, they fix everything in post. They can afford to just throw money at a problem, but they change costumes digitally now. In fact, they plan their reshoots ahead of time, and they even replace everything in post. We, on the other hand, the simple indie filmmakers, cannot afford to fix everything in post, can we? At this level, we can't waste our limited time, money, or resources on problems that should have been avoided in the first place. So with that said, we're going to change the conversation. Instead of fix it in post, we're going to fix it in pre. VFX is typically thought of as something that you'd only do in post, but as we just talked about, post is way too late. So when do we start? Anybody want to guess when is the best time to start?
Pre-production.
Pre-production? What part of pre-production?
We're making a shot list, so it's like making sure you're capturing things appropriately.
Writing stories.
About the writing phase, right? Yep. So in the writing phase, even if you've just banged out your first draft, it's a really good time to talk to somebody about visual effects, because if you think there's going to be visual effects in your script, if you just have an even idea that's going to have it, talk to somebody, because at this point you have a lot of room for flexibility. And there's a couple of important things that you can do at this point too. Number one, you could write your story around your budget. Now, what does that mean? If you know what kind of budget you can realistically get, you can write your story around that. You're writing around your resources. It's kind of like Robert Rodriguez. He had when he did his first movie, he did a couple grand. He had a police station and a bunch of guns or something like that. So it's like, okay, what do I have to work with? I'm going to work with what I got, right? Two, you budget your film around your story. This is more the typical route, and we'll talk about it in a minute. But if you have a budget, or you know what you can get, and you know it's not going to be a whole lot, you're likely not going to be writing the visual effects for the Avengers, right? If you have some epic sequences, you've got some really cool effects that you have in mind that could really drive the story, you could collaborate with somebody in VFX who could offer some creative suggestions about how you could achieve those effects. Or, in some cases, that could also be the person that has to tell you, maybe you got to write around some of these ideas, or maybe that idea might be a little bigger than you think it's going to be. So they may help you wrangle things in if some of your ideas start to exceed the budget or resources that you may or may not have. Case in point, I had the opportunity to work as the overall VFX supervisor on a Netflix series back in 2018. And I was working very closely with the showrunner, and we were working we had a whole bunch of pre-production sessions where we go through the script. I'd be writing down what we're going to be doing, and you storyboard and all that for, planning out what the shots we're going to do. But I was going through the script, and he brought up something new, and I said, hey, I know what our budget is, and I don't think we're going to be able to nail this. Netflix doesn't have, they did not give us a lot of money to do this movie. So I said, hey, I don't think this is really going to work. And he just kind of looked at me, and he gave me the best response ever. He's like, okay, 1 sec. All right, it's gone. So just wrote it right out. And he saved us thousands of dollars that we did not have just by changing one line. So that's what we call the final draft fix. Just write it out or write around it. You're the creator. Whatever you want can happen. And if what you want is a little too expensive, maybe change what you want a little bit. It's not to say don't tell the story you want to tell, just work around your resources at this point. So number 2 is budgeting your film around your story. Now this is kind of more the traditional route, but with some small differences. Most of the time, a writer will write a story, then they just write the story they're going to write, they seek funding for that film, but they don't really reach out to departments about, hey, what's it going to cost to make this? That's not their job, it's the writer. They want to write something creative. But when the film gets financed, they actually don't do as much homework as you think that they probably should ahead of time before saying, hey, we're going to need $20 million or whatever the number is. So they don't often really reach out to the VFX people or the makeup effects people or the people who are going to be doing the effects to get a real accurate quote. So oftentimes you find that most movies, do we ever have enough money to make the movies? No, never. Don't. So never. So what they want definitely exceeds their budget most of the time. But if you reached out to somebody in VFX early and talk about what you want to do, they can give you a realistic idea of what it's going to cost to do that or what kind of resources it's going to take to do that. And then you can bring that number to your investors and say, hey, instead of some arbitrary number you just kind of made up, because a lot of people say, I could probably do that for 20 million or 1 million or 50 grand. I could probably do it for 50 grand. Yeah, you know. But then they quickly realize that money goes fast, right? So when you ask for money, you want to make sure that it will cover everything you actually want to do. So there's been so many times that a filmmaker would come to me and say, hey, I've got this many shots, and I've got this amount of money, and that amount of money is not going to cover that, right? But they didn't reach out. They didn't plan ahead in that sense. So that is just definitely a position I don't want you all to find yourselves in. So. So let's say you finish your script, right? You're super jazzed about it. You're ready to start shooting. Are we ready to start shooting?
Yeah.
No. Before we could shoot your VFX, we need to find your VFX. Now this is when we break down the script. And you might be saying, like, well, I know what the effects are. I wrote the script. I know the script inside out. You might, but there's often a lot of effects that go unnoticed, the things you might not consider that usually become visual effects when you might not consider it that way. To show you what I'm talking about, we're going to do a quick exercise. I'm going to give you a few screenplay excerpts, and we're going to break them down together. It's just like a couple of lines, that's it. And you're going to tell me where the VFX are, okay? This one, let's see if you can guess what movie this is from. Exterior, crater, day. All right, sounds big already, okay. Thanos looks around, watching his troops disappear. Ships vanish from the sky. Where are the effects? Anybody? Hands? Anybody?
Is there anything
That vanishing, or is troops disappearing in the ships vanishing?
Okay. We're
Dennis?
yes.
Well, I was gonna say all of it.
Yes, all of it. Yes, all of it is a visual effect. First, let's start with Crater. Thank you. Crater. They built a set, but they did extensive set extensions on it. They probably replaced most of what they built already anyway, right? Thanos, he's fully CGI. Anytime his name appears, or even when it's not on the page, if he's there, it's a visual effect, and it's an expensive one too. His troops, yes, full CGI. His troops disappearing. That's a destruction simulation that has to happen. Then you have the ships vanish, and then you have the sky, and everything in this shot is a visual effect shot. Creatures, vehicles, buildings, landscapes, everything has to be built, and then everything has to be destroyed too. It's amazing how much you can fit into just that tiny little line. So when you're writing that tiny little line, it's important to think about what's going to be involved with making that shot, right? So let's dial things back a little bit. We're going to do another one. This is going to be a little more indie, and this is just an example. It's not from anything that you've seen. So, all right. Interior apartment day. Joan sits on the couch watching TV. Her phone rings. She picks up the phone to check her caller ID. And
Color E.
caller ID.
I was gonna say TV ad comedy.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go through those together. TV, we'll start there. TVs and displays are some of the most common things that I have to do. Caller ID, again, you're right. Here's the thing, a lot of these effects that we're going to cover don't necessarily have to be visual effects, but it may take a little more work to do up front. Like, let's say, you're doing a FaceTime call with somebody, right? You don't have to do a screen, just put the person in the other room and FaceTime with them, if possible. Sometimes the person's unavailable the same day, so, you have to do some kind of visual effect to do it. Or if it's a text message, just text message the person. Just do that from the other, change your name and all that, your ID on the ID, but there's ways you can do it. But sometimes, you just kind of need to do it this way. And again, that's going to be a theme that you hear throughout this is maybe it didn't have to be a visual effect. Maybe, that will save you a lot of time and money. All right, we're going to do one more. Interior car moving day. John is driving, Jane sits in the passenger seat.
Derby.
Yes. Yes.
The background like I'm driving.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the whole scene is a visual effect. Because if you're in a car, typically people want to throw up a green screen because it's easier in many ways. It can be cheaper. You could absolutely set up a process trailer and shoot your driving scene practically. You can, and hey, post-production will be a breeze. It's just all in camera at this point, right? But it's all a balance, In this case, practical might mean less work in post, but it means a lot of work in terms of crew, permits, insurance, there's the time it takes to reset every time you have a new take. Unless you don't care what the background is, if you need it to be a certain thing, then you gotta reset, bringing everything back. But if that's something you don't want to worry about on the shoot date, then maybe you're more willing to take the hit in post by shooting on a green screen. All right, so quick example on this. So I'm gonna be playing a scene from Netflix's Mindhunter, okay? I want you to count in your head how many visual effect shots are in this scene, okay? Over a course of a 2-minute scene, there were 19 shots over 1 minute, 49 seconds, and 6 frames. And trust me, frames matter too. You have almost 2 minutes of straight visual effects. Sometimes a producer will come to me and say, hey, I've got a movie, I need some effects work done. I said, how many effect shots you got? He says, oh, I just got one. It's one whole scene of visual effects. Or maybe it's one 2-minute shot of people sitting in a car. That takes a lot of time to do, a lot of render time, a lot of time to get that key. It may look like a simple shot, but getting that perfect green screen key is way more complicated than people think it is. And doing the visual effects for it could be tens of thousands of dollars for the big studios that do this. So that's, yeah, exactly. You got to balance thing. So circling back to breaking down your script, what should you be looking for? Now, I've put together a list of key visual effect types for you to just keep in mind. But I'm just going to go through this really quickly. I'm not going to spend too much time on them. Magic, sci-fi, supernatural, that's Harry Potter, that's Blade Runner, holograms, Star Wars, things like that. Action, stunts, safety, that could be explosions, gunfire. And when I say safety, it could be like if someone's thrown in an explosion, there's usually a wire or something to, safety things you have to erase after the fact too. Creatures, monsters, aliens, ghosts even, we'll say that. Talking animals, bugs crawling on someone's arm or something. Anybody have a trained bug? It's going to be visual effect probably. So, screen comps, again, cell phones, TVs, just like we talked about. Sky replacements and weather. Sometimes your story says it was the perfect sunny day. Maybe, or it was a rainy day. We're shooting in LA. It might not be a rainy day. You're going to have to change that. Crowds and extras, you want to, in your script, I believe there's a scene in a ballroom, right? Where there's going to be a lot of people, I think, and somebody standing on a stage talking to a group. Crowds and extras, are you going to actually have the amount of extras you want? Or do you want to fill in those spots, right? Digital makeup, that could be aging someone up, aging someone down. It could be, blood, scars, anything where you're altering the person's appearance. Scenes and vehicles, we just talked about that. Day for night. Sometimes shooting at night is not what your scene actually needs for what you're trying to do, or it may be impractical to shoot at night for certain reasons, so you might want to do a day for night. Props and weapons, I say, examples are like Thor's hammer, Captain America's shield, Iron Man's everything, So, scenes in open isolation, this one might be confusing, but what I define this as is, let's say you are in a boat in the middle of the ocean. Are you going to shoot your boat in the middle of the ocean for real?
No.
If you're even in water in the first place, you're probably going to be at a pier or near the dock. And I've done a few movies where they're supposed to be in the middle of the ocean, and there's a little boat just in the background, or you see some tourists on a beach in the background, and you got to erase all that. So you want it to look like it's in open isolation. Sometimes a lot of this, I've done a lot where people are in the desert and it's supposed to be the middle of nowhere. And there's power lines running all over, or there's a freeway in the background, so that you can do it, but you just got to erase all that stuff. And fire. Fire is kind of a big one because there's a lot of, and fire sounds obvious, if someone's on fire or there's, a fireball or something like that. But it also means candles, it means cigarettes and matches, because if you have a production of a certain size, I emphasize safety on every production, first of all, but when you have a production of a certain size where you have an insurance company looking over your shoulder, they require insurance, they require permits, they require They require a fire safety officer on set for these things. So, like, if you don't have those, you don't have an open flame on those sets, even if it's a little one. And I have, if we have time, I have a full story about that it will be a lot of fun to go through. Now, this is by no means the definitive list, since every script is different and it's impossible to know what you could run into. But every movie I work on, something's different. But I found that these are the most common indicators of a potential visual effect. And another important point, these are the list of effects you're planning for. This is not the stuff that you're not planning for that you do have to fix in post. And again, the avoidable ones, hopefully. I've created a spreadsheet for you. It's a helpful Google template, really easy to fill out. And I have a whole video on my YouTube channel about how to fill out this spreadsheet. The last thing I'll say about the script phase when it comes to visual effects is a quote from Abraham Maslow. If the only tool you have is a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail. Just because you can do a visual effect doesn't mean you always should. VFX may not always be the answer. You wouldn't believe the times I've read a script and I've actually talked a client out of hiring me because I said, you know what, you could actually do this better practically. Or you could or maybe sometimes the effect, it might feel too out of place for the story they're trying to tell. I did just work on a movie where the director had this great idea. I thought it was really cool, but I said, hey, I'm curious if I found there's some logic stuff that had to do with the effect. And he was like, oh, you're right. And actually that would be just way too left field for this movie. So we dialed it back and we didn't do the effect. In fact, the absence of effects can actually make your story stronger. Anybody heard of the movie Jaws?
Yes.
Anybody seen it? Like it? Yeah. Spielberg, classic, right? Originally, the shark was supposed to be in way more of the movie than it actually ended up being in it. They built this amazing mechanical shark, tested it in pools, tanks, and the studio lot. But when it got to the open ocean, it kept breaking down. You see, they tested it in freshwater, it was fine, but the salt water messed with all the mechanics and it started seizing up, so it barely worked. So now the shark is actually barely in the movie. It was just implied throughout the movie. And, the film, I think, is actually way better because, turns out while they wanted the shark in a lot more of the movie, they didn't really need it in there as much as they thought. That's why it's important for you to separate your wants and your needs. All right, now that we've broken down your screenplay, found all the little visual effects hiding between the big ones, now we shoot, right?
No.
Oh, there you go. You're with me now. Okay. No, we are now in pre-production. But before we shoot the VFX, now we need to know what they're going to look like, right? See, when you read it in the script, there's about 1,000 different ways you could interpret it. You might read it one way. I might read it another. You might read it in a very inexpensive way. I might read it in a very expensive way. And, so everybody's looking at it different. How it looks on the screen will make a huge difference when it comes to how you create the effect, how long it's going to take to do the effect, how much it'll cost to get done. And that's where previs comes in. It really is one of the first things that we learn in film school is they say storyboard, everything. Yeah, and you hear about Spielberg storyboarding, you hear about Hitchcock storyboarding. In independent productions, nobody's storyboarding. And it is so frustrating because storyboards and animatics are the blueprints to successful and well-planned visual effects. Good storyboards and animatics tell you everything from framing, blocking, camera movement, lighting, budget. Shot lists are cool if you're shooting a talking heads movie or if your scene just is like, I want a medium over there. Cool, we all know what a medium looks like. We can all kind of figure that out. But in VFX, you need to know exactly what it's going to look like. Is the person going to cross in front of the TV a little bit or not at all? Is the like I said about phones, are you holding the phone like this? Or is your fingers covering the screen? Are you moving? All these things matter. So once you know what the shot will look like, you can dissect the shot into the most simplest layers and work out what elements you're going to need to create it too. So this is an example we're seeing of a blueprint of how I planned to set up a particular effect on a show that I'm supervising. Now, this is a super basic effect too, but I just really needed to lay out, okay, this is where the camera's going to be, this is the framing, how we're going to do it, that sort of thing. But there were some characters that were sitting at a bar and some magic happens and then they're suddenly in a time bubble. So outside the time bubble, everything's moving in slow motion except they're moving in real time having a conversation. We set up actually at the same location as where this is all taking place, but where the actors were, we set up the green screen behind them. And then behind them, we were going to shoot, we would take away the actors, we would take away the green screen, and then, again, leave the camera where it was, have the background performers dancing around because they're in a nightclub.
Yeah.
And we shot that in slow motion, so it was like at 100 frames per second or something like that. And then, so the bottom is our desired final comp. And this is just kind of a look at how the scene worked out. So we see the time bubble there happens, and everything behind them is in slow motion. In other cases, you might need to show movement and timing. That's where animatics can come into play. In this example, we used a lot of tools. We had traditional drawings. You see on the top left is the original sketches that I did. And then we used Blender for 3D shots. It's the free software, if you've heard of it. Anybody know about Blender? I heard about that. Oh, yeah. Anybody using Blender?
I tried.
Great. It is not actually. You find the right tutorials. Blender is. I came up. I didn't know anything about 3D. I knew other CG stuff, but not 3D. And I learned Blender, and now it's my go-to. It really is, and it's becoming an industry standard real quick.
Yeah.
It's free. Anyway, so sorry, sidetrack here. But use Storyboarder is another software that I used on this, and After Effects to composite everything together. Now, so the animation may look janky, but it's not supposed to look perfect because this is just to give you an idea of what you're trying to do. It gives you the most basic ideas of blocking, camera movement, action, choreography. This is these animatics from Fast 10.
Oh, yeah.
It is super janky. And just wait till you see like people's faces in it. It's like really like, it's actually nightmare fuel. But this is what they use in $200 million movies as their animatics. And here you can see the side-by-side of what they actually ended up doing. You know, so you can see it shot for shot, how well they planned it too. So they know exactly what they're going to do for every shot. Wait, right here. When you see the kid's face on the animatic at the top. Hang on, coming up right now. Love it. But you don't need to know how to draw or animate, how to do storyboards or animatics. There are some tools out there that can help you with it. So I was just talking about the software called Storyboarder. Right, this one's free, which is great. A cool thing about Storyboarder is you can pose these actual pre-made 3D models, and it's super easy to pose them too. Logan, do you know anything about 3D?
No.
Did you use Storyboarder?
I use Storyboarder exclusively for storyboarding. Yeah.
There you go. And you can also draw over them if you want to add these extra details to your characters too.
Oh, that's so great. So are you doing all that with a mouse?
Logan, what do you?
I literally just use my Mac and the trackpad. I have no extra equipment whatsoever, but
Laptop, right?
Yeah, just on my laptop, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. This is another piece of software called Previs Pro, but the software is really great because it's for the iPhone Pro and iPad Pro, and in it you can build up your scenes, you can place lights, you can plan even what kind of gear you're going to shoot with. Like in this example right here, I'm actually setting up a driving scene with green screen, and all the stuff comes pre-made. I'm doing this on my phone at home, just doing this, you know, so and screen recording it too. But let's say you don't have any of this. You don't have this software. You don't draw. What can you do without using third-party software or drawing? You can just use your phone. This is Stunt Viz from Captain America: Winter Soldier. This is what the stunt teams, they've been doing this for years. They just use their phone, they shoot the scene, and they add little visual effects in there too, just to kind of map out what they have in mind. But this is like one of the best ways and quickest ways. You can just say, this is the frame I want. This is what I want to do, you know? All these techniques help communicate what you want to achieve and makes everything, especially the VFX, way smoother. But before I move on, any questions about this?
Do we start shooting now?
Do we start shooting now? No, you're on the video. Yes, now we're actually ready to shoot. But first, we need to find your VFX supervisor. That's an important role. Does anybody know the job of the VFX supervisor?
To make sure everything is set up on set correctly, to make sure so that it can go into post-production correctly?
Basically, yeah. Their whole job is to keep an eye on visual effects and make sure that what you're capturing is usable in post-production. I've worked on many films where they've come to me in post. They didn't have a VFX supervisor, and they just say, "Here's my footage." And I'm like, "This is going to be way more expensive than you think it's going to be right now." So, because you didn't shoot it in this, you just shot it to shoot it, which is fine. It can be done, But if you were aiming for a budget, you just threw that out the window. That could mean watching the monitor to make sure that your camera's not moving when it's not supposed to. It could mean being on set. They could also take photos on set, HDRIs, scans of the actors and the environments for lighting references sometimes for the bigger stuff. It could mean that they make sure you capture clean plates for your VFX shots, which I'll get into a little bit later. But most importantly, their job is to make sure that you're not doing any unnecessary fixes in post. Because in most cases, they'll be heavily involved in the post-production process. So this person you need to listen to, especially if they're going to be the one doing the VFX. Sometimes the VFX supervisor is like the VFX artist, the only guy doing it. So listen to them because you're going to make their life a little easier and make your schedule go smoother too.
And this is your position, right?
Is one of them, yeah. I've done a lot of things. So when they tell you something's going to be a problem, listen, because it's going to be everybody's problem later on in post. But this needs to be a dedicated position. This can't, like, if you're the director or you're the cinematographer and you think I can also supervise VFX, as talented as this group is, I'm sure, you're going to miss stuff. It happens all the time. In fact, this guy right here, speaking from personal experience, I've directed several short films, music videos, and commercials, and I've acted as my own VFX supervisor. And I'm constantly surprised at the things I miss because I'm not just doing that. You know, if I had somebody else just doing that while I'm directing, I can tell you that I'd have had a far smoother time in post-production. We're just speaking from experience. So let's get into it. Now you're ready to get on set. You're ready to start. Now we're ready to start shooting. We start shooting. All right. One of the big factors that can make a big difference between a manageable shot and a nightmare shot is how you move your camera. This is a big one. If you decide early on that you want a smooth post-production process, then you might not want to move your camera around too much. Now, I'm not saying change your story, or I'm not trying to take away from your artistic vision on these things. That said, if you want to move your camera, you can, but there's a lot you need to know about the consequences of, okay, if I want to move it this way or that way, what does that mean for me in post-production? But basically, think of it like this. More movement means more work. More work means more time. What does more time equal? There we go. All right. So with that in mind, I've summed up the complexities and consequences of camera movements into 4 levels of difficulty. Level 1, lock it off. No movement, don't move the camera. If you're having something that's going to have a visual effect on it, don't move it. It's the most efficient way to add an effect is if nothing's really moving, nothing's crossing in front of it. You know, that is the easiest scenario, most efficient scenario. Now, level 2, I call it the floating head. If you need the camera to track movement of a scene, keep it on the tripod, but you just pan or tilt up and down, left, right, as smoothly as possible. Tracking's still necessary, but it's at a much more manageable level at this point. If you need to move the camera with action a little more, you keep it as steady as possible. Camera stabilization tools like Steadicam, gimbals, motion control, even track and dolly, all these things help mitigate the challenges of object tracking in post-production. But let's say you don't have that, you know, wheelchair, skateboard, rollerblades, those all count. Those help. They're better than nothing in many cases. Level 4 is the run and gun. Rough, shaky, handheld movements. It's possible, you could do it, but it's going to take a lot of work to track the scene, to place the effect in the scene where it needs to be. Everything has to be hand-tracked, frame by frame. So if you're planning on shooting The Blair Witch or Jason Bourne, don't say I didn't warn you. Another element to consider when it comes to camera movement is your shutter speed. More movement also equals more motion blur, right? And motion blur confuses tracking software. In this case, you'll see he's demonstrating motion blur on a green screen. So adjusting your shutter speed to reduce the amount of motion blur is a huge step you can take to simplifying your visual effects process too. So speaking of green screen, one subject I could devote an entire class on, but I'm not gonna, is obstructions and separation. Now, what do I mean by that? To convincingly composite visual effects into a scene, you need to separate certain elements from the frame. Like if I wanted something to be standing behind me, you got to cut me out somehow. Yeah, there's two ways of doing that. There's rotoscoping and there's chroma keying. Does anybody know what rotoscoping is? Well, rotoscoping is the process of cutting out frame by hand. This process is extremely labor intensive. In some instances, takes an entire team of artists on any particular shot. This is some of the work from my team of artists that I work with. They can cut out strands of hair off someone's head in a scene. They're really good. But it takes a lot of people to do this work, especially if you're in a hurry. At the moment, there's some AI software tools that do a pretty good job at kind of masking things out. But this is the sort of thing that really is dependent on a person going in frame by frame and just brute forcing it. The computer doesn't just do this. Some people think that, that's a button, right?
Yeah.
Definitely not. This is all done by hand. So why is this important to know? Well, story time. I have a producer friend who I worked with for years, and she's like one of the smartest producers I know. And she had this production where she knew a TV comp was going to be done, right? This is my artist recreation of the scene. This is not from the production. And she's got a really good eye for catching things that are going to be a problem in post-production. And while they were setting up for the shot, they locked off the camera. They did everything right. It was just basically this. And no one was going to cross the frame, anything. So she had left the ruin. And then when she came back, at some point while she was gone, presumably the set dresser had placed a plant on the coffee table in front of it. And she was like, what is this doing here? It didn't need to be here. And so she knew that just by having that there, it would be the extra step of rotoscoping. Cutting it out would cost easily hundreds of dollars more just for this shot to fix it. And so she's like, oh, we're not doing that. No, she just took it away. Didn't affect the scene at all. It didn't need to be there. Fix it in post, averted. So now another way of separating elements is green screen, chroma key. Everybody's familiar with it, right? But also everybody kind of has a lot of misconceptions about it. They overestimate its capabilities quite a bit. They think just because you have a green screen, you can do this.
Yeah.
It's not just that. This is one of those things that the general public doesn't really know what goes. You don't know how the sausage is made, So they don't know that if your green screen footage isn't ideal or if it isn't perfect, then you're going to have to end up rotoscoping it anyway. I look at this footage right here, especially. I see the inconsistencies of the screen. It's well shot, obviously, right? But I can tell you there's so much of this shot because, again, they have a lot of CG characters between them and the green screen, but there's just regular extras there that are going to get erased and replaced. All of that's being rotoscoped anyway, right? Yeah. So they don't know. A lot of people don't know that if things aren't just right, you're just going to have to trace it out anyway. Or if you wear a green suit on a green screen, that's not going to work. This is one of those things that everybody thinks there's a magic button for. Like there's the eyedropper tool. Everybody thinks, just eyedropper and it's done, right? But not exactly. That's not exactly how it works. I want you to take a look at this shot. And this is a shot that I did on a production. Tell me what might be wrong with this shot. What's not ideal? It's a breakdown, but you can...
The color light.
Shadow.
Green light.
Yes, they lit him with a green light on a green screen, right? Now, the filmmaker I worked with him, he's actually a great effects artist himself. It was just like, we just didn't have time to kind of fix that problem, so we just kind of had to go with it. The green screen was basically useless. We had to rotoscope him anyway to achieve this shot, which made it cost a lot more than it should have in the first place, right? We could be here all week talking about things like motion capture, virtual production, CG creatures, simulations, all that. But my goal today, again, like I said, is to give you the tools to avoid problems in post-production. That's what we're talking, this really practical stuff. Not everybody here is going to be doing the VFX on your production, unless you are. Is there...
In feature.
Okay. Who's planning on doing VFX on not just this production? Who's interested in it?
Well, maybe epic.
Okay. But that's not even everybody here, right? But everybody should, that's why everybody should kind of know what's going to go into this because, hey, this is the group project, right? So I want you guys to be able to make really well-informed decisions and proactive steps on your set and in pre-production so you can avoid these things. Now, and to do that, I want to give you my top 8 avoidable fixes in post. And as I said at the start of the talk, these are avoidable, meaning these don't need to happen. Like these are things that you do not need to fix if you fix it on set or in pre-production. Spike tape. Does anybody know what I'm talking about when I say spike tape? Well, so like when you block out your scene, you generally put some spike tape down on the ground. It's great for the medium tight shots. But when you go to those wide shots and you forget it was there, someone's gonna have to paint that out. Yep. I've had to paint out a lot of spike tape in my house. Enough. but it's more than people want to spend on it for sure. If this tape, just to erase tape off the ground, you'll have like a little red T on the ground or something, that where the person's supposed to stand, and whereas you could just fixed it, it's gone, right? Reflections. Anytime you're filming around a reflective surface, you have to be really conscious of where your cameraman is, where your crew is, equipment, all these things that you don't want to be seen in the shot, right? John Wick, they did this on purpose because they wanted to blow your mind with the scene. But this is just to kind of give you an idea. Painting out reflections are not just some of the most common things I have to paint out, but they're also the most difficult things to paint out. Yes?
I would have. I was watching, or it was a couple of years ago, but I saw the Law and Order Criminal Intent, and it was one of like the last episodes of the last season, and they had a camera like what is that thing where they have
The dries and mellow?
yeah, and it did like this, and I saw the reflection, but it wasn't like this reflection that I was in there. It was like very thin, and you had to pay attention.
Oh yeah.
But if you saw it, you saw it.
A lot of the reflections I have to paint out are usually on the side of a car. Like that, people forget, like you're filming a car, cars are reflective, especially if you're, instead of shooting it directly from the side where you're just going to see your reflection right away, just kind of come over here and just at a little bit of an angle, you'll be better off for it. But yeah, like I said, they can be some of the most difficult things to paint out. Boom mics. Those are fun. Yeah, they're great for audio, but when they photobomb, that's no bueno, So that's something to just look out for. Is your sound guy clear of the frame, So, the crew, just be really conscious of where your crew's standing. Signage. So sometimes this is something you plan to do, where if you're going to shoot outside a cafe or a storefront and you need to change the sign on a building or to something more appropriate or, for your story, that's cool. That's not what I'm talking about, though. Let's say you're shooting on the street and there's a billboard or something in the back, a sign in the background to a shop. Maybe you don't have the clearance to use it. Yeah. Maybe you just don't want it there, If you can avoid shooting it in the first place, then you don't have to erase it. I use this clip in particular. This is from the Netflix series that I had worked on, and I replaced that sign that they're walking behind and says Sydney Cafe. That's my kid's name, so I just slipped them in there.
Cute and so natural.
The fun things that VFX artists like to do is just throw the names of family. Beauty work. Now, I've had to do some touch-ups on actors, male and female, and who have had a sudden breakout, just before shooting. That's not the stuff I'm talking about, because that's stuff that's just part of the gig. You gotta, sometimes. But sometimes makeup isn't exactly on point. They wanted to clean it up a little bit ahead of time. If it might just need a little extra love, maybe there's a stray hair or something that needs to be, painted out or something. But that's something that you can, on set, if hair and makeup is just a little more vigilant. Sometimes they can catch some of these things on last looks. Continuity. You look at the clock in the background of scene, and just like suddenly it's like 1 o'clock, and then suddenly between shots it's 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. Things like that. Had to paint out clocks or change the time to be the correct time. But in general, continuity, that's generally the script supervisor's job. And they do a really good job of that. But if everybody just kind of keeps an eye out for it, it easier. It makes it easier. If you see something, say something. One of those situations. So, coffee cups. Now, I say coffee cups, but I really mean anything that was left on set accidentally that shouldn't be there. I just call all of them coffee cups.
There was like a coffee cup, right?
Yeah, that right here, the coffee cup from Game of Thrones, right there.
So funny.
Yeah. And I even tweeted what I saw. I was like, "Hey, call me. I could have done that." But this could be anything: water bottles, hats, rolls of gaff tape, walkie-talkies, just something that shouldn't be there. And And this also goes for things that don't exist in the time period, like a TV antenna in Downton Abbey, a water bottle in Game of Thrones. Somebody spotted that he just hid the water bottle behind his leg while they were shooting the scene. This one I worked on. I was working on the Steve Jobs movie with Ashton Kutcher, and the set designer put the dustbuster on the wall, but they weren't invented yet when this scene was supposed to take place. So this leads me to my final story. I was working on this supernatural movie. There was a scene between these two characters that were having a seance, right? They were surrounded by candles, as you do when you have a seance. And there were all these magical things that happened throughout the movie, but there's nothing that was supposed to actually happen here, right? And one thing that was never brought up and definitely not budget for was these candles. So like I said about fire, right? You heard me talk about fire. When you have an open flame on set, you have to meet all these requirements, right? This production, I don't know what the circumstances were. They just did not meet the requirements. So they said, we can't have open flames on set. So these easily like a couple dozen, maybe 100 candles on set were all LED candles.
Right.
They looked like wax, they were like that, but they flickered, but they were LED candles. And this movie was a period piece. And it took place in a time where there were no LED candles. I found out about this in post-production because, of course, hey, they wanted to fix it in post. They were like, oh, we can fix this in post, right? But they did not budget for this at all. We were already working with a budget that was far lower than it should have been to do the effects they wanted to do. They wanted to do the Avengers with like a very low budget film. Basically, we couldn't make it work. We just couldn't make it work. And now their movie has LED candles in them. In this movie that takes place where it shouldn't have LED candles. But that's what I'm saying is about communication. If they had just talked to me ahead of time, or somebody brought this up, or they knew what was the deal, and then I could have advised them, say, hey, okay, I know you definitely can't afford these shots, because again, these candles were in every single shot of the scene, and they were very clearly in focus, right? And you could tell that they were LED candles the whole time. And this scene was like 5 minutes long, so like I was just saying about a 2-minute car scene was like 19 shots, right? But this was cut. So it was like easily 40, 50 shots in the scene. And you could see them. And I was like, there's no way you can afford to do this. Now, if they had asked me ahead of time, I'd say, okay, maybe we do 1, maybe 2 shots to establish, but the rest either they're sitting down, so maybe you tight shots where you shoot from like here, a medium tight shot where you just kind of don't see the candles in the background, or you shoot in a longer lens so the candles are completely out of focus, because then the flippering will work at that point. But this wasn't the case. So again, now their movie has LED candles in it when it didn't need to have them. But you guys are smarter than that. Yeah, obviously. And you are all driven, creative thinkers. I know that you know how to get things done. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. So I'm not saying that you'll never have to fix anything in post, but if you can plan ahead, and I mean down to the frame, the few fixes you will have to do in post will be far less painful and cost you far less money, far less time in general.
Thank you so much for watching. If you found this talk helpful, or you have your own advice for avoiding a fix it and post scenario, let me know in the comments below. And be sure to render me out a like and hit that subscribe button for more tips, tutorials, and interviews to help you start making smarter visual effects decisions before you ever roll camera. And if you want to save both time and money on your VFX in post-production, check out my book, Shooting for VFX, your on-set guide to saving money in post-production. It's packed with even more insights, cheat sheets, and real-life stories from the trenches, all meant to help you plan your VFX smarter, earlier, and avoid the most common pitfalls in producing visual effects. Keep creating, keep planning, and remember, together, we can reframe what's possible.